joining us now. NBC's chief foreign correspondent, Richard Engel from Jerusalem, and Richard Haass, president emeritus of the Council on Foreign Relations and senior counselor for Centerview Partners. So, Richard Engel, first to you. The families of the hostages are really outraged. They're furious after the deaths of the 3 hostages. We saw large crowds of people protesting in Tel Aviv over the weekend. That does not mean that they are against the war. They're just against the way the hostage situation is being held. Richard?
Generally in this country, there is still almost universal support for the war in Gaza, for the war against Hamas. There is, however, this one very vocal, very sensitive group of the hostage families, and they gathered in Tel Aviv. They gather there every day in front of the Defense Ministry, and they are urging a change of tactic, but not a change of strategy. They want a resumption of negotiations. They want Prime Minister Netanyahu to release however many Palestinian prisoners are held in Israeli jails, as Hamas is asking for, and to get the hostages out now, because they're seeing their family members, distant relatives, friends staying there, their condition clearly deteriorating as time goes on. And then this incident where the 3 hostages, apparently abandoned by their kidnappers, tried to run to safety and made signs and took their shirts off and did everything they possibly could to signal that they were friendly, not hostiles, not Hamas, running toward attack Israeli soldiers, including shouting in Hebrew, and still they were killed. One of them shot repeatedly. He was shot, injured, then he was shot again, and these accounts are making the hostage families say over and over, this has to stop. We need to go back to the negotiations with Hamas. We told you so. We spoke to one of the families, and you could just sense the frustration, the anger in her voice with the government and with everyone who is not doing more to get the hostages out.
Richard Haass, jump in here with the talks. The CIA Director Burns, Israel, Qatari counterparts. Is this a sign that those talks could start again? They're not going to be easy.
No, they're never easy. But yes, they will start again. And I think that at some point you'll have some new pause, a temporary, if you will, ceasefire. I expect it'll again be a package, Andrea. More aid will go in, prisoners will be swapped, some hostages will come out. So that will continue. That doesn't, though, affect the basics of this. It doesn't affect, first of all, what you've been talking about with Richard Engel, the breakdown of discipline in the IDF. There was already going to be a massive investigation about Israeli intelligence and defense preparedness, or lack of it, on October 7th. There's now obviously going to need to be an investigation here. How did discipline so break down? And then what Secretary Austin's doing. The gap between what the Biden administration wants, really measured, calibrated, careful, intelligence-driven, small unit operation, versus what the Israelis have been doing for the most part. Really what the president described as indiscriminate bombing. And then there's the whole what comes next. So, yes, I think there'll be future small deals between Israel and Hamas, but I don't see any of this really addressing the fundamentals.
And Richard Engel, there's been a lot of emphasis from the Prime Minister in the last couple of days, more emphasis than in the past, about no two-state solution. And that's been implicit in the way the settlements have expanded in all of his policies for quite a long time. But making that specific, it's been interpreted, at least on this side of the, in the U.S., by a lot of people as this is Netanyahu trying to appeal to his base because he's trying to ensure his political future at a time when people are supporting the war but not supporting the leader.
Netanyahu's personal popularity and confidence in his leadership is incredibly low, and his opponents, who seem to be growing by the day, worry that his actions are motivated by his personal survival, that he's trying to placate his coalition which includes far-right settlers. So when the United States is calling on the government to rein in the settlers, it is in effect calling on the government to rein in itself, that there is not a distinction anymore between the Israeli government and the fringe movements, because they have the same agenda and they've been brought together by what happened on October 7th. And if Defense Secretary Austin's trip was to pressure Israel to move to a more targeted campaign, I certainly didn't hear it, and Israel certainly doesn't seem to hear it. Instead, what we heard in that press conference was lots of talk of a gradual transition on Israel's timescale, that it will maybe finish clearing up areas in the north where it's been doing house-to-house fighting, allow potentially some people from the south who are displaced there to move up into the north. Then it will shift to the south. So what I heard was a very long, months, potentially years campaign.
And Richard Haass, there is also the feeling by some of the president's, supporters as well as critics, that he has isolated the U.S. in terms of the European allies, the United Nations. Not that the UN hasn't always, on a large scale, been against Israel on a lot of votes, but that what's happening in Gaza in particular needed to see a shift sooner away from the so-called bear hug of Israel, that he's been too close to Netanyahu, and that it's hurting our leadership overseas.
Well, it is. We are isolated. I also think it poisons the long-term U.S.-Israeli relationship. I think what the Israelis are doing is short-sighted there. It obviously alienates the population in Gaza, the West Bank, the Arab world. And the whole idea of using military force is to change the context in a way that leads to something better. This is not going to do this. I think the pressure on the president then is going to be to do something else. His patient, friendly advice is not being heeded. I think, Andrea, what you're likely to see sooner rather than later is a speech that goes over the head of the Israeli government, over a prime minister who refuses to listen, and essentially tries to make the case to the Israeli people why Israel's policy may not be in Israel's own self-interest. It's going to be very tricky politically. Got to be sensitive to the emotional trauma that defines Israel. But I think you're going to see the president begin to make something of a turn, and I think it has to happen.